What would happen if I told you that Hamilton's accident in the Netherlands GP was not his fault? What if he revealed to you that the telemetry data exposed Ferrari unforgivable strategic errors that left him completely helpless? From the first career bars, something did not fit at the whole car of Lewis Hamilton. Although its initial rhythm was competitive, telemetry data began to tell a different story. A silent story, invisible to the viewer's eyes, but devastating in its implication. From Tour 8, the SF-25 real-time monitoring system began to register an anomalous increase in the degradation of rear tires. What should have been a progressive and controllable curve quickly became a descending slope that affected not only the grip, but the complete behavior of the car. Riccardo Adami, Hamilton's career engineer, detected the problem and instructed him to adjust his management of curves 8 and 9, two of the most demanding circuit. However, that order was just a patch. The data clearly showed how the car began to lose traction at the curve outlet, especially in prolonged lateral traction situations. This generated a constant sequence of survival, some barely noticeable from the onboard chamber, but registered with total precision by the telemetry sensors. The important thing here is not that the survival existed, but that they increased around after. A clear sign that the tire management strategy was not working. But there is a factor that is often underestimated: dirty air. Hamilton spent much of the first stint behind several cars, caught in the most slow cars' aerodynamics or similar rhythm. Under these conditions, the air flow to the front wing is distorted, and that directly affects curve stability. This combination of rear surveys and front subwiring is a nightmare for any pilot, even for one with 7 world titles. What seemed like a tire problem was actually the result of a lethal combination of factors that went far beyond the rubber. Distribution of unstable aerodynamic load, poorly calibrated brake balance, and the impossibility of cleaning the rubbers due to constant traffic. This context, added to the fact that the car has already dragged from Friday to enter the optimal temperature with the average tires, left Hamilton without real tools to combat degradation from inside the cabin. And most worrying, Ferrari knew it. The data were there. Temperature graphics, differential behavior, torque record delivered to the rear axle. Everything indicated that the car became increasingly unstable. But instead of acting proactively, the team's strategy remained in a conservative area, hoping that the pilot will be fixed. At that point, what really failed was data-based decision-making. It is not that the car was ungovernable. It was becoming a double-edged weapon without the team recognizing it publicly. Ferrari had the information, but not the tactical reflection to transform it into a correction in time. That strategic passivity was the one that prepared the land for what would happen 15 laps later. Hamilton, then, was not an erratic pilot or a veteran out. He was a pilot trapped within a technical system that did not respond to the warning signals that his own instruments were screaming. The return 23 of the 2025 Netherlands Grand Prix was, without a doubt, the turning point. A moment where each possible variable that can take a pilot to the limit aligned against Lewis Hamilton. But to understand why the accident occurred, we must analyze the complete set of decisions, technical inputs, and external conditions that surrounded it. Because what was lived was not a simple calculation error. It was a millimeter accumulation of circumstances that, once a certain threshold was crossed, became inevitable. On the path to curve 3, a parallel, closed and extremely demanding curve for the rear train of the car, the telemetry revealed a key fact. Hamilton entered between 3 and 4 km/h more speed than its average in previous turns had been. It may seem marginal, even irrelevant for a casual spectator, but in the context of a critical curve, with degraded tires and in changing climatic conditions, that excess becomes a sentence. This small speed was not accidental. Hamilton had been trying to recover the lost time behind George Russell, and in his attempt to maximize the exit speed to the long rear straight, he adjusted his braking point intentionally. It was an aggressive maneuver, designed to win a few tenths in a key section. But what I did not know, and here lies the root of the tragedy, is that the track had begun to moisten. At that precise moment, the first raindrops had begun to fall. Not intensely. Not enough to activate an immediate change of strategy in boxes, but with sufficient intensity to modify the grip coefficient in specific areas of the circuit. In particular, painted surfaces such as outer pianos and guide marks were the first to become slippery. This is a well-known feature in light rain conditions. The paint layer acts as a treacherous lubricant, and if a pilot is not warned, it can fall into the trap without having any possibility of correction. Ferrari at this point failed in a loud way. While other teams such as McLaren and Red Bull had already adjusted their brake maps and warned their pilots about variable adhesion conditions, in the case of Hamilton there was no technical update. Not a message on curve moisture 3. Not a modification in the brake balance to prevent the rear axle lock. Nothing. According to sources close to paddock, Ferrari's communication channel with Hamilton remained silent during the critical interval in which the track changed its status. What happened inside the car was as immediate as irreversible. In telemetry, it is observed that when the brake releases and apply the gas just to the vertex of the curve, the differential delivered more even than usual to the rear axle, with tires that were already on the edge of their useful life. The loss of traction was sudden. The car ran violently, and although Hamilton applied rapid correction with the steering wheel, the car was already sliding towards the outer area. There was expected a lethal combination: wet track, painted surface, and a concrete wall without escape. There was no possibility to save him. Not with that speed level, not with that car configuration, much less without a previous warning. The impact was inevitable. The car hit hard, causing significant damage to the rear suspension and forcing immediate abandonment. But the most serious thing was what the accident left in evidence: that Hamilton had been making decisions to the edge, without the minimum tactical assistance that a top team like Ferrari should provide. Until that moment, Hamilton had been executing a meticulous race. He had managed the degradation as indicated, maintained the rhythm of the front group, and was executing a sustained pressure strategy. But what was expected of his track engineer did not arrive. And in Formula One, a pilot without precise information in changing conditions is like a blind man driving at 300 kilometers per hour. This was not simply an accident. It was the logical outcome of a system that did not react. And for a team that aspires to championships, allowing one of its most experienced pilots to be exposed to this type of tactical vulnerability is unacceptable. After the accident, the official narrative was quick: a pilot error. The cameras showed the image of Hamilton coming out of the car, annoying but serene. Ferrari, in his first statements, did not offer greater explanation. But deep down, both engineers and strategists knew that what had happened was much more complex. What was seen on the track was only the visible result of an invisible, silent, and deeply revealing failures about the current state of the Ferrari system. One of the greatest myths in Formula One is that accidents happen for a single cause. But reality, especially at high competition levels like this, is that accidents are gestated by layers. Dead information layers, decisions taken late, poorly aligned internal dynamics, and in this particular case, by a team culture that still does not find the exact point between autonomy of the pilot and technical control from the wall. Lewis Hamilton is not a rookie. He is a 7-time world champion. A pilot who has seen and felt all possible conditions in a car. But no individual talent can compensate for the silence of a pit's wall at the critical moment. On lap 22, Ferrari had access to exactly the same climatic information as the rest of the teams. They had the data of surface temperature, relative humidity, satellite rain maps, and above all, the records of other cars through the same sector of the layout with small landslides. It was sufficient information to send a radio warning. They did not. And this is where the structural problem enters. Ferrari continues to work under an internal hierarchy system that slows decisions. There is no clear command chain in emergency situations. Tire engineers cannot overwritten a strategy order. Strategies cannot modify in real time the brake map without prior technical validation. And while all that internal protocol was developed, Hamilton was already entering a curve that does not forgive mistakes. The team simply was not up to the urgency that the situation demanded. Because the accident in Zandvoort was not just a track mistake. It was a mirror. One that forced all those involved, pilot, engineers, strategists, and managers, to face an uncomfortable reality. That the promise of this new cycle, even in its initial phase, is in danger of fracturing if there is no real transformation in the way Ferrari operates as a competitive structure. From the technical, the telemetry data does not lie. The poorly managed degradation, the mismatch, the aggressive braking point, the lack of dynamic balance in variable conditions. Everything was registered. And everything could have been anticipated. But the most serious error was not mechanical. It was human. It was organizational. It was strategic. And that is where Ferrari failed structurally. Because it's not about whether the car is fast or not. This is if the team can function as an organic unit, capable of adapting in real time to the multiple factors that change a second-to-second race. Without that capacity, no pilot for talented that has achieved sustained success. And you who are seeing this, what do you think Ferrari should do? To rethink its internal structure? Delegate more autonomy to your track engineers? Give Hamilton the control you need? Because what happened in Zandvoort was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a debate that goes far beyond a wet curve.